Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Network is AFR Talk, the American Family Radio Talk Network. Great to have you on board the USS Focal Point. Number to call if you would like to join the conversation, 888-589-8840. Again, 888-589-8840 is the number to call. And I want to go back just for a minute to address some more of the fallout from this ruling from the Supreme Court last week on gay marriage. And I pointed out that this goes back to this shows you the importance of midterm elections, by the way. We have one coming up in 2014. About a third of the Senate seats every election cycle, every 2 years, come up for election. Every House seat, every representative has to stand for election every 2 years. They're closest to the people. And so they have to stand for election more often than the senators do. The senators were designed to represent the states. Originally, before the 17th Amendment, senators were actually selected by their state legislatures. And the idea there clearly, and that's why the 17th Amendment, I think, was a perfectly bad amendment, just like the 16th. The income tax amendment was a terrible amendment. Most of the amendments have not improved our Constitution. Most of them have made it worse, our form of government. But set that aside, the purpose of having state legislatures select senators was to make sure that the interests of the state were being represented. And so the senators would know that, look, if they didn't represent the interest of the state and the priorities of the state legislature, then they were going to be 6 years and out. They could get recalled by their state legislature. And so it made them, they sort of had to be more responsive to the needs and the concerns of their individual states because they'd lose their office if they didn't. That's a real convoluted process about why that amendment went into place, but it weakened our government. And I have no idea. Oh, yeah. I know where I was going with that. The importance of midterm elections. You know, right now, liberals control 55 seats in the Senate, and conservatives or pseudo-conservatives only control 45. So they've got a majority. They're close to the 60 votes that they need to break a filibuster, only have to get 5 renegade Republicans to cross over to break a filibuster. And so that means they have a powerful control over nominations. So if conservatives would like to see bad nominations blocked, good nominations go forward, then they pretty much have no choice but to seek to gain control of the United States Senate. And we see what happened in 1986 when the control of the Senate passed from conservatives to liberals. Even though Ronald Reagan was the president, they stuffed Robert Bork. The year before, when the Senate was still in control of Republicans, Antonin Scalia, who's as conservative as Robert Bork, he slid through without a fight. 1987, after the midterm elections, Robert Bork gets borked. I mean, that word went into our vernacular. He got borked. He lost his nomination battle 58-42. And Howard Baker, who was a Naga-hide Republican, fake leather Republican, went to Ronald Reagan and says, look, you can't send another Antonin Scalia up there. It's not going to fly. You got to recognize the times are changing. You've got to come up with a moderate nominee for the Supreme Court, and that's how we got Anthony Kennedy. We got Anthony Kennedy because we didn't go to the mattresses for Robert Bork. Now, Anthony Kennedy wrote the opinion in Romer v. Evans in 1996. That's where we, in effect, became Bull Connor in his view. I mean, that's where he first started talking about this animus language. He said the only reason that state amendment, it wasn't a marriage amendment, but it prohibited pro-homosexual propaganda in the state of Colorado. And it passed decisively by the voters. And Anthony Kennedy set it aside, turned it over, said, no, you can't, because the only reason anybody would be for Proposition 2 is what it was, is because of their animus toward homosexuals. And then he wrote the Lawrence v. Texas ruling in 2003, and that's the one where Antonin Scalia said, this is the end of morals-based legislation. Antonin Scalia predicted in 2003, this means we are going to get same-sex marriage. Remember, same-sex marriage, when that ruling was handed down, was still unheard of. There was no such thing as same-sex marriage anywhere in the United States. And Scalia, looking down the road, said, look, this is going to precipitate the arrival of same-sex marriage on the scene. And sure enough, and now we've got it in 12 states, well, 13 now because of what's happened in California. And DOMA, the federal definition of marriage, has been shredded and trashed by the Supreme Court. So everything that Scalia predicted is now coming true. And realize now, I said in the column I wrote in the wake of the Supreme Court decision that, look, what the Supreme Court has done here by overturning DOMA on the basis of animus, because they don't like you and me. They think we're bigots. And therefore, we're going to overturn this law that you support because we think you are lousy people. We think you are cretins. We think you are knuckle-dragging Neanderthals. And therefore, it doesn't matter to us whether the law that you support's a good law, whether it would be good for society, whether it's sound public policy, whether it is consistent with the best in social research, whether it would create the best possible environment for children, whether it is consistent with the Constitution. We don't care about any of that. None of that matters to us. The only thing that matters to us is that you are mean-spirited people. You have hostility and hatred in your heart for homosexuals, and therefore we're not going to defend or uphold any law that you are behind. Now realize, and I said, look, this is an IED. This is an improvised explosive device that's been placed under the roadbed of every marriage amendment in every state. Because now the only thing that has to happen is for some group, and the ACLU has already pledged $10 million to this fight. They're already out there planting trigger devices in these IEDs. All they've got to do is go to court, get it into court, and say, look, we object to this amendment because it's motivated by animus. And the Supreme Court said that violates the Fifth Amendment. You can't do that. It violates the 14th Amendment. You can't do this. And the courts then will be pretty much compelled by what the Supreme Court has done to overturn these state amendments one after another. And it's already happened in Michigan. I mentioned that in the prior segment, that Michigan has a Defense of Marriage Constitutional Act, was co-authored by my good friend Gary Glenn. And the Michigan legislature passed a law in 2011 that limits spousal benefits to couples who are in marriages which are constitutional according to the state constitution. And they banned the awarding of spousal benefits to homosexual partners of teachers and other municipal employees. Well, somebody, ACLU or somebody, went to court and said, look, you can't do that. That's against the law. That's discrimination. That's animus. That's hatred. And a federal judge said, yeah, you're right. And he cited the opinion of the Supreme Court in his ruling setting aside these benefits for partners of same-sex couples. So and Antonin Scalia predicted exactly the same thing in his dissent. He said, look, this is going to pave the way. I mean, it's like landing lights. If you want to know how to destroy the there's 29 now with California gone. There are 29 states that have state marriage amendments. If you want to destroy those, you want to shred them, you want to overturn them, you want to obliterate them, then here's the way to do it. And realize every single one of those amendments was voted on by the people. Every one of those amendments that protects marriage in their state constitution represents the will of the people at the ballot box. And so federal judges now are taking it upon themselves to just disenfranchise all of those that voted for natural marriage protections. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Let's go to James, Midway Park, North Carolina. James, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, well, just a couple short things. What these people are doing, they are mocking God. They're saying everything that God said was true. They're saying God is a lie. Now, these judges, what are they doing? According to Isaiah 10, the Bible says, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that right grievous which they have prescribed. Any law that grieves the nation, that turns this nation away from God, woe is coming to those people. And what does Galatians say? It says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked, and they are mocking God, period.
All right, well, listen, I appreciate that word, James. It's a strong word, and I think an appropriate word. You know, God says at one point in the Scriptures that he will not be mocked. Scripture says quite plainly, God will not be mocked. You can only shake your fist in the face of God for so long, and then at some point there is going to be some kind of kickback from that, some kind of blowback from that. In God's economy, God's justice in the end is going to be served. All right, James, thank you for that call. Let's go to Mike in Woodlands, Texas. Mike, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Appreciate you taking the call. I am really disturbed with the DOMA issue, and I know everybody's jumping up and down about the homosexuals being happy for their being able to break the DOMA. My point is that now that that's been broken, what's to stop it from going the other way? There's no moral ground left for any defense of marriage. In other words, if I want to marry 5 women, do you see that?
Yeah,
Something
absolutely,
like
Mike.
Up?
Absolutely.
I think nobody's talking about that side of it.
Yeah. Well, and we need to, and I appreciate your call, Mike. Thank you for that. And Mike is exactly right. We've made this observation many times before that once you break the plane, once you break the threshold that marriage is a one-man, one-woman institution, then logically there is no place to stop. And already, the ink isn't even dry on the DOMA ruling, and people are already talking about polygamy. Trust me, polygamy is going to be the next domino to fall. I have a Twitter follower who's part of the LDS Church, and in fact, I tumbled to the possibility she might be part of the LDS Church because she was supporting polygamy in the wake of the DOMA decision. What's to stop now plural marriages in America? If it's discrimination to not allow people to be married to somebody of the same sex, then it's discrimination not to allow them to marry multiple partners. And I asked her, are you of the LDS Church? And she says, yes, I am. And she supports polygamy. And I think we're going to see a rush for that. I think the LDS Church is liable to come out in support of challenges that would legitimize polygamy.
American Family Radio.